Hey everybody, this is Russ from Metro Game Core. I want to talk to you about the new Lenovo Legion Go's that were announced here at CES, and I got my hands on all three of them. There are three new models. There's a lot to unpack here, especially in terms of specs and whatnot. And so I'm actually going to have to refer to my laptop for a lot of this stuff just because I've seen so many things here, but this is the one that I think is probably the most important to make a video about right now. So what I want to do here is kind of walk you through all three of the models that Lenovo is promoting, and none of these are out just yet. The first one will be out, I think, later on this month, but some of these will be like further on in the year, so they're just kind of more announcements and prototypes. Either way, I think that some of these options are pretty exciting, and I love the fact that we are moving in a really cool direction when it comes to these handhelds. So without any further delay, let's go ahead and get started. Okay, we'll start with basically how I got my hands on them. So there are a couple different events that I got invited to. The first one was a Lenovo/AMD event, and this not only had Lenovo and AMD, but also Microsoft was there, as well as Valve. And so this was really awesome to see all four of these really big players in the scene just coming together to discuss things like handheld PCs. Who would have thought that, in this year, 2025, that we would have a whole panel of like these big movers and shakers who are actually just talking about handheld gaming, which was really exciting for me. Now at this panel, they said some pretty interesting stuff. AMD was mostly talking about how they have been optimizing their chipsets to work really well with handhelds, but then also, the Valve folks were talking about the fact that they are bringing SteamOS officially to one of these Legion Go's, and they're also going to make it publicly available to be able to use on other handhelds. And this is really awesome. We have options already like Bazzite and things like that to be able to unofficially put SteamOS on a handheld, and it's a great experience. But I don't know, I really like the idea of it coming officially from Valve, the guys who actually made the OS in the first place. Another really exciting thing is that the Microsoft rep said that they do plan on producing some sort of like integration between Xbox and Windows available for handheld PCs before the end of this year. So the way I'm thinking of it is that it might be a front end or maybe just some sort of like toggle button, like big picture mode or something like that, that will integrate Microsoft's suite a little bit better into actual Windows, so maybe it'll actually feel like an Xbox. I think that'd be pretty cool. Anyway, in terms of handhelds, there were three that Lenovo was showing off, and again, some of these were really prototypey. Let's start with the most prototypey of them all, which is the new Legion Go 2. I'm not actually sure that's the name, so don't quote me on that, but essentially it is the second generation fix for the Lenovo Legion Go. Again, I don't have all the stats, and I've also realized I'm not very good at taking notes on the fly in mid-conversation with reps and stuff, so they were telling me all sorts of stuff, and I'm like, oh yeah, I'll totally remember this. And then here I am in the Airbnb, and I'm like, oh man, what did they say? So I do remember that it is going to be a large screen again. I think it is 8.8 inches again. It also is going to be OLED this time around, which is awesome. 120 hertz, I believe, or maybe 144 hertz. Again, there's just so many different models here, so don't quote me on some of these specs. Either way, it is still going to, they're focusing on having a large screen, OLED now, and then also having a high refresh rate. It might be 144 hertz. So a lot of that felt very similar to the original Legion Go, just a nice big screen, detachable controllers, all those things that we've kind of come to expect from this product. But there are a couple key differences. Number one is the fact that it's more rounded at the bottom, and so it feels almost like the shape of a Steam Deck when you're holding it. And so I do like the fact that they have made this a little bit more of a rounded shape. Previously I did not like how it kind of cornered, almost 90 degrees, felt a little bit sharp. So right off the bat, I think the Legion Go 2 feels a lot more comfortable than it did before. The D-pad has also been retooled. It's got more of a disc shape to it now, so almost like a, Shield Sega Saturn kind of pattern. And I do like that too. It does have a membrane feel to it, and so it's a little bit tactile, but also has that nice quality mush that you might be expecting as well. So I thought the D-pad was really good. Now, they didn't have other Legion Go's to test with, like the old one versus the new, so I wasn't able to do like a direct comparison, and honestly, it's been a bit since I've touched my original Legion Go, but the analog sticks also feel updated. They are a little bit less tension than you might expect, but again, I think I've mentioned it before, but I don't mind having a light tension on analog sticks. I think it feels pretty good. And so for this one, it did feel good for me. The overall design was really very similar. The face button's in the same place. We've got, additional function buttons and whatnot. There's a little bit more there, but we couldn't actually use some of the software suite. So I'm not sure what some of these buttons are there for, but there are actually now 6 buttons on the face here. So you've got your start and select, other menu buttons, and then other menu buttons. And so we'll see how that all kind of plays out. It does still have that right trackpad on the bottom right, which mostly you're going to be using for navigating windows. It's not going to be like integrated into most games, so it's mostly a mouse pointer to be able to just kind of make things a little bit easier when you're trying to get through the UI. Now, because it's more rounded on the bottom, that's like the number one problem that I saw, is that the palm of my hand, like this part right here, would touch against the trackpad as I was using it. This is a problem I've seen before with like the Neo Kun, it's very similar in that. And unfortunately, with many games as you're playing it, and if you happen to touch that part, it thinks that you're moving a mouse. And so it'll go into keyboard and mouse mode instead of controller mode. And so it'll like pause the game, and that'll happen, and then you'll get back to the game once you move your joysticks around. So that can be very disruptive. I talked about that a lot in my Neo Kun review. Unfortunately, I had the exact same experience here with the Lenovo Legion Go 2. Because it's more rounded, it's just more apt for my thumb to actually touch it, as opposed to the squared off one that we had previously. And so that was kind of a downgrade that I found, and I wasn't able to talk to like a software rep, but my recommendation going forward, and I'll send them an email about this too, is that they need to have an easy way to disable that trackpad. Neo still doesn't have an option to be able to disable it, which makes the Neo Kun unplayable for me. And so hopefully they'll be able to have a quick software fix for this by the time it releases. And speaking of release, this is one is like not going to be coming out for quite some time. They just said this year, basically. So I'm not really sure what the launch time period is going to be. I would guess, maybe sometime around this summer. The other thing, that's probably worth talking about is like the chipset. So we've got like the 3 different ones now. Again, these are not very easy specs to kind of figure out because AMD is being a little bit coy about what the specs actually are and what kind of equivalent these are. It's really hard to tell. But so there's now the Z2 line. So there's Z2 Go, Z2, and Z2 Extreme. And I believe that this new Legion Go will be that Z2 Extreme. So I'm not sure what that equivalent is just yet. Again, this was more like a hands-on preview, and so I'm not really feeling one way or another in terms of what the specs are going to be. I assume that will all get sussed out in the future. It really came down to just the hands-on experience. And in terms of being hands-on, it definitely does feel more comfortable than the previous Legion Go. I had to use 3D printed grips to actually maximize my experience with the Legion Go. This one doesn't really feel like it needs it. And so the ergonomic bumps feel good. It just feels like a Gen 2 product, which I really like. The only other thing I can think about in terms of controls and what I maybe didn't like is the fact that they still have all those FPS mode buttons on it. So, with the original Legion Go, you could pull off that right analog stick and then put it in a little puck thing, and you could use that for FPS games. That never really sat well with me. Like, I had a hard time getting used to that, but I'm not a mouse and keyboard player. But this new one has those same buttons all along it. And so even when picking it up and playing with the demos and whatnot, you could tell that your hands would just naturally press on the buttons. Even though they're disabled when you're in handheld mode, you're still going to depress that button. And that can be kind of annoying. I talked about that in depth with my Legion Go reviews. That's still there. So if that bothered you before, then it might bother you now. But one neat thing is that these new Legion Go controls will actually work on the old Legion Go. So if you're looking for improved ergonomics without having to spend additional money for a 3D printed fix or whatever, and you want to try out this new D-pad and everything else, it does sound like they're just going to be offering these controls like sold separately. So if you have a Legion Go 1 and you're happy with the performance and the screen and everything else, but you want maybe a better controller experience, then you can actually do that, which is pretty cool. And they also have like this new attachment thing. And I think they talked about this one previously. I just haven't really caught up with everything that Lenovo's been announcing. There's a lot. But this one actually is going to be like an angled grip that you can slot the controls into as well. So if you want to have like a controller experience, you can do that. And they have that there. And obviously both the Legion Go 1 and the Legion Go 2 will work with these. Anyway, my big takeaway with the Legion Go 2 is that it's still a work in progress, but I think it's coming along nicely. I like the ergonomic feel of it. I have some hesitation about, those additional buttons still kind of getting in the way when it comes to handheld gaming. And then also that trackpad, I felt that I was pressing it way too much, and so hopefully you can disable that in the software. And so other than that, I think things are going to be pretty good. I'm still not really sure what it's going to be like in terms of performance. At the AMD booth, which was like the second thing that I went to, they had the Legion Go 2 as well. And so you'll see some of this footage is like really dark. That's at like the restaurant where they had the AMD Legion or Lenovo like kind of joint thing. And then at the AMD booth, they had better lighting. And so you'll see some footage from that as well. And at that one, they had Miles Morales playing. And The gameplay was not great, and I don't know what's going on, right? I can't actually look at the TDP or any of that kind of stuff. Like, it's all just kind of set in place, everything's locked down, and so I don't want to make any judgments about performance right now. I have no idea what this Z2 chip is going to be like in terms of performance, but I'm just going to trust at this point that, you know, AMD is investing into this, that Lenovo is as well, and so we'll see all that kind of stuff when it comes to specs when I actually finally get a review unit and we actually put it through its paces. Okay, moving on, the other thing that was really exciting to me was the Legion Go S line. So there's going to be 2 other devices, and these are going to be more on the budget-minded category. And the exciting thing is that one of them will be operating under SteamOS. And this is not Bazite, this is literally from Valve. They've been working on it for a couple months with Lenovo. They're like partnered up. And in addition to this, they're also going to make this SteamOS option available on their website or somewhere else through their beta client or whatever it happens to be, so that you can install this on other handheld PCs as well. Obviously, each one of those is going to take some work, both from Valve and the company, to kind of make sure everything's compatible. You know, you got different display drivers, controller drivers, different control options. All those things need to be accommodated for. But when it comes to the Lenovo option, which they're calling the Legion Go, and it's got a black color, I think they're calling it some shade of purple or something. Either way, it was really dark, so it's hard to tell. But they did have it running, and yeah, it's just like a straight up Steam Deck, but with a different shape and feel, and I think that was pretty awesome. And this one does have a similar setup in terms of just the controls. You know, it's just your standard brick kind of style, no detachable controls on it. It has start and select and menu buttons up top, and those menu buttons are Steam menu buttons. So you push one, it brings up the quick access module, or whatever they call it, and then you can also press the other one, it'll bring up like the Steam menu. And so it just functions like a Steam Deck. It's pretty cool. It also has a trackpad, but it's a lot smaller, and it doesn't get in the way of your palm at all. So it's really just kind of like a little nub place, you know, and so you'll be able to use that to kind of move around if you need to. But the beauty of SteamOS is that you often don't need a mouse unless it's like dire circumstances. And so most of the time you can just get away with just using the controls like a console, which is what everyone likes about SteamOS. So really exciting in that front. This one feels a little bit closer to complete compared to the Legion Go 2. So the controls feel really good. Again, really kind of bulbous and rounded. And so it doesn't quite have that same feel as the Steam Deck. It feels a little bit more circular than the Steam Deck, but still very good. The analog sticks also feel very good. They have detachable little thumb caps they were putting on them, I guess just to show off accessories. But obviously I think if I'm playing it, I'm going to be playing it raw, and I think it just felt really good. Same thing with like the face buttons and the D-pad. Again, same very similar kind of structure to the Legion Go 2. There were like some little differences that I noted, but again, prototypey, and so I don't want to make any sort of judgments right now, but yeah, still has that nice like membrane feel to it, but still quite tactile. And so yeah, really enjoyed that experience. One thing that is unique about the models that don't have detachable controllers, they have these little switches on the back that can go basically changing your analog trigger travel distance. So you can have it just do full analog, you know, if you're playing a racing game, or you can shorten it if you're going to be playing a shooting game, basically like Destiny, which is what I love to play. And so I think that's actually pretty exciting, the ability to change and adjust that. There are other handheld makers that are working on similar things. I'm going to talk about that in my like CES roundup video when I get back, because there's a lot of other handhelds that I tested as well. The back of the controller also had some really nice texture to it, and this is something that obviously I'm very fixated on when it comes to just how a device feels. And so this one had a nice smooth texture to it. I didn't detect any smudging with the black plastic, always happy to see that as well. And so just in general, it just felt really good, like a solid, like brick style controller. And so this one was really nice. This also has an 8-inch screen, and I believe it is 120 Hertz VRR, and also has a 1200p resolution, 16:10 aspect ratio. So essentially a 1080p screen, but a little bit taller. And I think that's an ideal setup for an 8-inch screen. You know, the original Legion Go is like a 1600p resolution, and that's a lot of pixels. And that's one of the reasons why like sometimes battery life is not great on the original Legion Go. And so that's one of those things where I think this is a good marriage between the resolution and the battery size, which I believe is like 55 watt hours. Don't quote me on that again. Again, lots of stats being thrown around while we were looking at everything. So in general, I feel like this is going to be a more like mid-tier or low-tier. Honestly, it's like a Steam Deck competitor because it's going to be running SteamOS. The MSRP, or at least what they talked about in terms of pricing, is going to be $500. So it's like not that much more than a regular SteamOS. Now the chip is going to be a Z2 Go, so that's the low end of the Z3 Z2s they talked about. As far as I can understand, again, they're all talking about, you know, number of cores and threads and like how many GPU cores there are and you know, cubic units or whatever they call that stuff. That's just not really like my forte. You know, I don't like to focus too much on the numbers. I like to talk about the gameplay experience. And my understanding, at least talking to others and whatnot, this will be very similar to a 6800U CPU. And we saw those a couple years back. And that had a little bit higher of a performance benchmark than the original Steam Deck, but not by much. And you had to throw a lot of power at it to get to that point. And from what I've been told, you are going to be able to put quite a bit of power into this handheld as opposed to being capped like the Steam Deck is. So we might be able to, throw additional power at it to get improved performance over the Steam Deck, which is great because, like I mentioned, the price point is not that far off from the Steam Deck. And this is going to come with 16 gigs of RAM, 512 gigs of storage. So pretty standard sizes for that stuff, as opposed to the 64 gigabyte version of the Steam Deck that we had seen previously. So I'm pretty optimistic of this being basically a mid-tier kind of budget, Linux-friendly console-style handheld that you can just go into Best Buy and pick up, right? That's one of the things you can't do with the Steam Deck. And so I'm actually pretty excited about this one. I know that people will think, well, it's not going to have the latest and greatest chips. I'm not going to be able to play, whatever, Black Myth, Wukong at 60 frames per second and stuff. I don't think that's what they're targeting here. They're really targeting that Best Buy sale. And I like that idea. The greatest thing about the Steam Deck is that SteamOS experience, that console-like experience, and if we can have that in big box stores like Best Buy, I think that's just a win for consumers across the board. Now, for those who don't want to go into the SteamOS world, there is a Windows version. Basically, same hardware, different color. It's going to be white, but it's going to run Windows. And it sounds like there's going to maybe be 2 SKUs for this one. So the one that's coming out the most recently is going to be the $729 model, so a $729 model, I should say. So this one is going to be coming out later this month, and it'll be available on Best Buy. In fact, it's available for pre-order on Best Buy already. And so looking forward to this one because this is going to basically be, I don't know, like an improved shell and hardware and whatnot, but with that Windows experience, if that's what you're hoping for. Now, this one will have more specs than the other one, so it's going to be 32 gigabytes of RAM and then a full terabyte of storage. So it is a little bit on the higher end, but it is costing more, $729, and it's Windows. And I think it's ironic that you're going to pay additional money to have the Windows experience when everyone wants the SteamOS experience. That's the one I would pay for, which is pretty funny. So I'm really curious to see, once the black one comes out and it's $500, how many people are going to buy that one and then potentially put Windows on it if they want a Windows handheld, because I don't know, it looks like it to be the same hardware in terms of the chip and everything else. And so it might be possible just to save yourself, a couple $100 and get the $500 model. Yeah, it's going to have less RAM, less storage, but then you can just put Windows on it if you really want Windows. But I think that the SteamOS one is going to be better. To be honest, I kind of want to take the 729 model, again, I really like white handhelds, and put SteamOS on that one, right? Make a nice white Steam Deck. And so pretty excited about that one as well. $729 for the Legion Go S chip, if it's going to be a 6800U, is pretty high. Going to be curious. I don't know if that's going to be a big seller compared to people just waiting for the $500 one with SteamOS, or just waiting for the proper Legion Go 2. And so we'll see how that all plays out. And then I mentioned, I think there might be 2 SKUs of the white one. So I think they might also be offering one that's going to have, lower amount of RAM and storage. So similar to the black one, but that one doesn't seem to be the one that they're going to be launching first. And so we'll see how that all goes. At this point, I'm just kind of thinking of it as 3 different handhelds, between the Legion Go 2, the white one that's going to run Windows, and the black one, which will run SteamOS or dark purple, or whatever they're calling it. And so, yeah, that's really about it when it comes to just my hands-on with it. I think that all of them feel really good, and a marked improvement in terms of ergonomics and controls over the previous Legion Go. So if you are looking for, the thing that Legion Go in particular, these Lenovo handhelds hadn't really going for them, at least with the first one, is that big screen, that kind of kickstand experience and everything else. That's all still going to be there with the Legion Go 2, but then also they are taking a direct hit, or direct shot at all the other competitors in terms of hey, you also want a candy bar handheld that's pretty decent, 16:10 aspect ratio, and with the option for SteamOS. I think that's all pretty cool. Another exciting thing for me is going to be, what are they going to do with SteamOS with the other handhelds? Are we going to get an ROG Ally X build of SteamOS that we can put on our handhelds with an 80 watt-hour battery? That'll be really interesting. Are they going to, I don't know, are they going to go with Intel? Is SteamOS going to support the MSI Claw? What's going to happen with that too? And so very exciting stuff with all this handheld stuff. And that's why I wanted to make a quick video now before I get home and do like a roundup of CES, because this was like the topic du jour while we were here, basically. Everyone wanted to talk about and look at the Lenovo handhelds, which I think is probably a great marketing move for this company, you know, just kind of in capturing like all of that kind of excitement when it comes to handhelds, grabbing in Microsoft and Valve and AMD all together. It really positions Lenovo as being a big player when it comes to this, where previously, you know, it's always been kind of the Asus, ROG, and Ally and stuff, and they really didn't have anything to say about what's coming out or what's coming this year or anything else like that. So they really are just kind of focusing on the laptops right now in this part of the year, and who knows what will happen later on. Anyway, let me know what you think in the comments down below about these 3 different SKUs and whether or not you're planning on picking up any of them, or do you have the original Legion Go? Are you just happy enough with that? Maybe get some new controllers for it. So, as always, thank you for watching, and this will probably be my only video from CES. I've got a lot of footage and stuff, but I'm kind of overwhelmed. You know, I'm in a house with 6 other YouTubers, and it's really hard to find a time to be quiet and to kind of talk about this stuff. And so this will probably be my only video, and then I'll do a roundup when I get home in a few days. So, as always, thank you for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe if you found this helpful, and we will see you next time. Happy gaming.